Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we wrap up your week with a glimpse back into what went on in the past week. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. This week, South Korea proved its capabilities in the field of space transportation by successfully launching its very own Nuri space rocket on Thursday. Despite a 24-hour delay, the launch completed its first ever actual mission, putting 8 working satellites into orbit. A South Korean team of experts' 6-day trip to the Fukushima nuclear power plant to inspect the wastewater being stored there came to an end on Friday. They say they reviewed the facilities with their own eyes and based on scientific standards. South Korea's central bank this week decided to keep its key interest rate at 3.5% for the third straight time. While the country seems to be nearing an end to its rate hike cycle, the BOK chief hinted that lowering the key interest rate is unlikely this year. South Korea's space industry took a big step this week with the success of the third Nuri space rocket launch. It's more meaningful this time as it was Nuri's first ever actual mission where it carried 8 satellites into orbit. We connect with our Lee Kyung-eun at the launching site. Hello there, Kyung-eun. Fill us in.
Hello, Tommy, from Naro Space Center, where I can say is the main gate to space. This is where Nuri blasted off into space at 6:24 p.m. Korea time, Thursday. And this time, unlike the first and second launches, Nuri was carrying real payloads on board 8 operational satellites on actual mission. And putting them into orbit was what would determine the success of this launch. The primary goal was putting the main satellite, the next generation small satellite 2, into its target orbit, where it can always make use of solar energy to operate in generating Earth's images. And as of 7:50 p.m., it has been confirmed that the launch was indeed a success. Take a listen.
South Korea's domestically developed spacecraft Nuri has successfully completed its third launch with the support of the public. The next generation small satellite 2 and 6 CUBE satellites have been confirmed to be successfully separated. But one among the 4 Snipe CUBE satellites needs a bit more time to be confirmed.
The officials added that the CUBE satellite may have actually separated successfully, but just may not have been captured possibly by being in a blind spot. It is unclear when the officials will be able to find out the results, but they've made clear that they can declare a success regardless of the separation status of the CUBE satellite, because the ultimate goal of this launch was the successful transportation of the next set too. And the main satellite is also confirmed to be successfully communicating with the ground.
It is indeed a milestone achievement for the nation's space development. But I hear there were hiccups along the way, which were not much of a big deal though, right?
That's right. It was not all easy because this launch came after 24 hours of delay, as Wednesday's initial launch was called off just 3 hours to go. It was due to a technical glitch found in the software that controls the helium valve, as it was unable to receive signals from the control tower. The valve is key to releasing pressure generated while helium is injected into Nuri, which cools the liquefied oxidizer. The problem was not with the valve itself, but with the controlling system due to a communication glitch between 2 computers, one in charge of the launching process in the control center, and the other located underneath the launching pad. But this was all sorted as of 5 a.m. and Nuri was given the okay. Take a listen.
The Ministry of Science and ICT has decided to go ahead with the launching procedures with the aim of a 6:24 p.m. liftoff time after assessing everything that needs to be taken into consideration.
A lot of factors have been considered before making this decision.
Factors affecting the next attempt date are now how long the satellites can be sustained onboard Nuri. We also have to keep injecting air to protect them, which cannot go on for days. There's also the weather and possible collisions with space objects, among the other things that have to be taken into consideration.
This second attempt was made in a rather swift manner compared to the second launch, which was delayed twice because it was a software issue, not hardware. So Nuri did not have to be transported back to the assembly center as the problem was fixed while Nuri remained in position.
Now, Kyung-eun, you were there in Gohung this entire week up until the blast-off on Thursday. Tell us, what was it like to witness the moment there?
That's right, Tommy. I was roughly 3 kilometers away from the launching site and I was able to witness the blast off. There were enormous thunder-like noises and I could also feel some tremors too. That really shows an awful lot of energy needed to propel Nuri weighing 200 tons. Right behind me up on the hill are the control centers where officials and researchers might have been watching the flight anxiously but with much excitement too, of course.
That is amazing, Kyung-eun. Now, before we let you go, we've had 3 Nuri launches so far, but what makes Thursday's launch more special or significant?
Well, many things, Tommy. First of all, it is the very first time for Nuri to take on an actual mission. It carries 8 working satellites, not dummy satellites or a verification satellite in the second launches. And each of them has its own mission with the main satellite, the next generation small satellite 2, tasked with generating images of Earth. We could say that they are Nuri's first passengers, with Nuri directly transporting them, making the service a lot shorter than in the second launch when it used a verification satellite which entered its orbit, then released CUBE satellites.
Compared to the last launch, this time around we will be looking toward the actual success of the satellites and provide a satellite launch service for our customers.
Also, this launch marks the beginning of South Korea's privately space endeavors. The Ministry of Science and ICT and Korea Aerospace Research Institute transferred their expertise to Hanwha Aerospace, which will be in charge of 3 more Nuri launches to come until 2027.
Thank you so much, Kyung-eun, for keeping us updated all this week. Have a safe trip back to Seoul. That was our Lee Kyung-eun at the Naro Space Center in Gohung. And following the launch on Friday, Nuri's main satellite sent signals that its mission was going, well, smoothly.
South Korea's first homegrown space rocket, the Nuri, transported 8 satellites into orbit on Thursday. The nation's science ministry confirmed on Friday morning that communication has been made successfully with the main satellite.
On the day of the launch at around 7:58 yesterday, the initial communication with the next generation satellite 2 was successfully made at the first attempt, followed by 7 additional communications at dawn today. Also, we have checked and confirmed that the functions of the satellite, including the transmission and reception system, command and data processing system, and the power generation system of the solar panel are all operating normally.
As for the remaining satellites, the general director said that communication has been made with 2 out of 4 CUBE satellites developed by the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute and 2 of the 3 developed by Korean companies. That's 5 out of 8. The general director said that given the characteristics of the CUBE satellites, it could take a few days until communication is made with the remaining 3. As for the next generation satellite 2, that was considered to be the most important passenger on board Nuri, is operating as intended.
The main technology on board the next generation satellite 2 is called synthetic aperture radar, or SAR. This is a payload that allows us to observe planet Earth day and night even if it's cloudy. So it's our top mission to verify that the technology is functioning.
Other challenges include measuring the amount of radiation near Earth and also verifying other core space technologies. We asked him what the future may hold with this technology.
What we are hoping is to use the technology in the future to conduct research on Arctic sea ice. For example, if we expect that the change in the Arctic sea ice may influence countries around it, we can use the data to warn them or to predict future climate change.
The next generation Satellite 2 still has years to prove itself, but if all goes well, we may have taken a step toward in getting key information on climate change. 김정실, Arirang News.
The much-anticipated launch of the Nuri rocket took place in Kohung in the southern tip of South Korea. And it was bustling with visitors who took the time to visit the village and enjoy that thrilling moment. Our Shin Se-byuk was there and filed this report.
As the countdown began for Nuri, the excitement and anticipation in the Naro Space Center continued to build. This time, the atmosphere was filled with a renewed sense of enthusiasm after a delay the day before. People from different parts of the country came all the way down to the southernmost county of Kohung to witness history.
It was delayed by a day, but seeing it in person today brings even greater excitement.
We came here yesterday, and although the delay was disappointing, I believe that setbacks often pave the way for success. It's truly an honor to witness this moment.
An engineer involved in the development of the Nuri rocket was feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement.
This is the third launch attempt for us, and it hasn't been an easy journey. We faced difficulties in the previous two attempts, but I've seen countless encouraging comments online from the public. Our colleagues and engineers are giving their best, even at this very moment. I remain hopeful for a successful launch.
Teams of engineers, technicians, and support staff have been meticulously preparing for this momentous event. And the moment finally comes. Families and friends, young and old, all together celebrate the groundbreaking moment.
We traveled all the way from Daejeon to witness this lift-off. It's truly amazing to experience it together with my family.
The Nuri's blast-off is a milestone in the country's growing space program. And it is also a testament to the dedication of the engineers and the enthusiasm of the people. The soaring Nuri rocket has taken people's aspirations higher, which will reach new heights with each future mission. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News, Kohung.
This past week, a 21-member team of Korean experts took a trip to the Fukushima nuclear power plant to assess if the wastewater there is safe enough to be released into the Pacific Ocean this summer. In the meantime, the South Korean government is doing its best to allay public concerns about seafood being exposed to radioactivity.
After their two-day on-site inspection of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, South Korea's 21-member inspection team held a meeting with Japanese officials as part of their final itinerary on Thursday. One of the key things the team inspected was the plant's power supply to see how the facilities would cope with unexpected events such as earthquakes and tsunamis. They also requested any further information the Japanese officials could provide for them, as the South Korean side stressed that significant progress could be made in evaluating safety with as much information as possible made available. With the team returning to Korea on Friday, the head of the delegation, Yugo Ki, said that a comprehensive evaluation will be made after further analysis of their inspection, and the results will be announced as soon as possible. Despite the inspection, South Koreans are still very much concerned about the planned release of contaminated water stored at the facility and how it will impact seafood originating in Japan. While seafood from Fukushima is still banned, imports of Japanese fishery products from other regions are steadily increasing, with imports of scallops, sea bream, and pollock on the rise. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety has been inspecting all fishery products coming in from Japan, with 5 cases in which trace amounts of radioactivity were detected and returned since 2011. While the South Korean government is doing all it can to reassure South Korean consumers through transparent inspections, concerns may rise even more once the wastewater is eventually released into the ocean. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And on Thursday, South Korea's central bank went ahead with another rate freeze. That keeps the benchmark interest rate at 3.5% for the third straight time. Consumer prices are being tamed, but BOK still has fears and uncertainties over an economic slowdown stemming from poor exports.
The Bank of Korea has once again frozen its key interest rate. The central bank announced the decision on Thursday after a monetary policy committee meeting. The base interest rate stays at 3.5%.
Inflation is slowing down, but it's expected to stay above the target level for a while, so we have decided to keep our tightened monetary policy. The Board of Governors voted unanimously to freeze the rate.
Now, this is the third time in a row that the BOK has decided to keep the rate unchanged. The central bank cut the base rate in 2020 amid concerns over the economic recession due to COVID-19, but started to raise the rates in August 2021. Analysts say with the consumer price index coming down to the 3% range, May's decision reflects the central bank's intention to avoid throwing cold water onto easing inflation. Economic uncertainty was also one of the factors for the rate freeze. Amid sluggish exports, South Korea's real GDP for the first quarter of this year expanded slightly, just 0.3% from the previous quarter, barely avoiding negative growth. The country's current account balance in March too narrowly avoided a deficit for 3 consecutive months, while the trade balance remained in the red last month for the 14th month in a row. After the monetary policy meeting, the Bank of Korea also cut this year's economic growth rate from 1.6% to 1.4%, considering the sluggish recovery of the IT and chip sector and the weak impact of China's reopening. The consumer price index is expected to be at 3.5%. With the central bank's decision to hold the rate, the interest rate difference between South Korea and the U.S. now stands at 1.75 percentage points.
The most worrying part about this hugely widened gap is an outflow of capital and the weakening of the Korean won. But the freeze shows how the government sees the current rate and the capital outflow as relatively stable for now.
Meanwhile, BOK's Governor Lee Chang-yong says there is still a chance for base rates to go up in the near future, but the market sees things a bit differently. Following the rate freeze, the market widely expects that the rate hikes to end at this point, at least for now, and rate cuts could possibly come in the second half of this year. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
The BOK's concerns over sluggish exports were clearly reflected in the latest figures. So far this month, the country's exports are dropped by around 16% as weaker demand continues to persist. But not all hope is lost. South Korea's finance minister anticipates a turnaround later in the year. Let's turn to our Moon Hae-ryun for more.
South Korea's exports are on a downward slope, but Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho remains optimistic that things will start looking up soon. Data released by Korea Customs Service on Monday shows that the total value of exports for the first 20 days of May was $32.4 billion, more than 16% lower than the same period last year. On-year declines for the country's exports have continued for 7 straight months, putting the country's trade balance in the red for the longest period since 1997. So far this year, South Korea's trade deficit has hit $29.5 billion. All major industries, with the exception of the auto industry, saw declines in outbound shipments. Computer-related goods saw more than a 47% decline on year, and semiconductors fell by nearly 36%. Exports to all of South Korea's major trading partner countries fell in the same period. Shipments to Taiwan saw the biggest decline of nearly 54%, but exports to countries such as the United States and China also fell. Despite these figures, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho said in a parliamentary session on Monday that there will be a turnaround in the months to come. He said that the country's trade deficit will decrease after the month is over and that he anticipates a different set of results in the fourth quarter of the year. That being said, experts remain pessimistic about the recovery of chip exports, which has seen 9 straight months of decline.
The recovery of the semiconductor exports will likely follow the recovery of the global economy, and as there hasn't been any changes in the external conditions at present, It seems as though this uncertainty will continue for the rest of the year. I don't think semiconductors will play a big role in changing the current export situation.
On the other hand, auto exports saw nearly a 55% jump on year in May due to the growing popularity of eco-friendly vehicles. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Now for an economic breakthrough, South Korea has turned to future cars on the heels of record high figures for automobile production and exports in recent days. Public and private sectors are pouring over $10 billion into the auto parts industry. Our business correspondent Lee Hyun has this report.
South Korea is preparing for a new era of future cars by supporting the country's auto parts industry. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday highlighted the car parts sector as a starting point of mobility innovation, saying it's essential to support the industry in responding to shifting auto paradigms, electrical, AI, and autonomous. During a meeting on Tuesday, the public and the private sectors decided to inject around $10.9 billion into the auto parts industry. This is to nurture talent in the future car technology sector, expand exports of car parts, and enter into the global supply chain. It also set a goal to increase EV production to 5 times the level it's at now by the year 2030, while expanding exports to key markets such as US and Europe and high-potential markets such as the Middle East, East Asia, and the ASEAN region. Through this, the ministry expects car exports to exceed $80 billion this year, an all-time high. Furthermore, the government thinks this may bolster high-tech industries such as system chips, large-size displays, and a biohealth sector. To support car parts companies, a memorandum of understanding was signed by automobile companies and 8 related institutes. Auto giants including Hyundai Motor, Kia, and General Motors Korea pledged to help stabilize auto part companies' liquidity while taking part in joint tech development in order to strengthen partnerships with the car parts industry. These new measures come amid impressive growth in the country's car industry, where its exports saw a record high of $30.9 billion from January to April this year. Monthly domestic car production in March, meanwhile, surpassed 400,000 units, the highest figure in 6 years. Lee Hyun, Arirang News.
That's all we have for this weekend. Thanks for staying with us.